Welcome to World at Work TV. I'm Allison Avalos, and I'm joined today by Keith Kitani of Guidespark and Dalana Brand of Electronic Arts. And we're talking a little bit about how to maximize compensation management when you're going through a transformation. Start off by talking a little bit about why traditional compensation management is perhaps failing to engage and really motivate today's workforce.
Yeah, when I think about compensation, I think it's really the tie to performance management as well. And if you think about performance management, traditionally it's been annual reviews and then ratings, which lead to compensation adjustments. And I think if you think about today's employees, they want more ongoing feedback, especially around performance. And it's also a better way to develop employees by giving them more ongoing feedback. And so I think you're seeing that one-time experience is not being very motivational to employees. And so companies are really starting to think about how do you go to more of an ongoing, and that also affects the compensation programs.
There's a lot of conversation these days about changes in performance management. What are some of the more common transformations you're seeing and the roles that managers play in those changes?
Sure. So the first one, as I just talked about, is really around kind of moving from annual reviews and ratings to ongoing conversations. But there are other things like transparency around compensation philosophy is a transformation we're starting to see, where organizations are starting to be more transparent about their programs and philosophies around compensation. And also the natural evolution of companies where, maybe through a merger or maybe they go public, where they have to really rethink their compensation programs and how they manage performance for those organizations. And in all those cases, I think change is kind of core to that. And then when you talk about managers are really the core to communicating change and really supporting that change. And I think they really are the linchpin of any transformation. And I think oftentimes they aren't very well prepared. And I think for organizations to really make sure they're training and communicating on an ongoing basis is going to be critical to really back up the managers in these transformations.
Thinking about the accountability and kind of looking at a traditional model versus some of the changes we're talking about, historically, compensation has sort of been in this space of determining budgets and getting that information out to managers, and here are the guidelines about how you make those pay decisions. When you look at the transformations happening, how do you expect there will be a shift, if at all, between the accountability of compensation professionals or total rewards professionals, to be a bit more broad, to line managers, to those who are actually having the communications, as you say, with employees? Is there a shift there, or is that just something people talk about? What
we're starting to see across some of the clients that we work with is a shift toward really empowering managers and really utilizing them, communicating on an ongoing basis, because it's not, as I mentioned, a one-time experience. It's really an ongoing experience.
From our perspective, it's exactly as Keith said. It's about manager accountability and empowering them to make decisions. So the shift from a comp perspective is about being less prescriptive with the guidelines and the framework and really teaching managers to fish, so to speak, right? Giving them all the tools in their toolkit and giving them the training to build their capabilities so that they can be empowered to make those decisions moving forward.
So Dalana, your organization has obviously done some work in this space. Talk a little bit about the challenges you were facing with regards to performance management and what specific changes that led to for you.
So we underwent a shift in our performance management framework. We were having a new strategy for the organization to lean into digital in a much different way than we had in the past. And so if you think about that environment, it's all about being creative and innovative. The speed to change is really, really aggressive. And we knew we needed a completely different sort of performance bar. We needed different skills and capabilities and really a new culture. And as we looked at our old performance management system, it was much about, as Keith also said, ratings tied to compensation outcomes. Managers really had no say in that. It was an annual conversation once a year. The feedback was so slow. You couldn't really expect employees to act on any changes that they needed to make. In an environment of digital where things are changing rapidly, sometimes daily, ongoing conversations, ongoing feedback with managers so that employees can react is really what we needed to do. So we moved away from a rating system to get rid of ratings, and that was backed up and supported by ongoing fluid conversations back and forth between managers and employees so that managers could be that conduit to change and employees could feel like they were empowered to be able to really drive their performance outcome in a much different way.
So what were the ripple effects of this work on performance management in thinking about compensation administration?
Yeah, our biggest issue really was managers being very fearful and concerned about moving away from the ratings because they didn't have the capability, right? Everything was prescribed for them previously. And so we got a lot of pushback So the downstream sort of consequence is that we really had to go through a series of rigorous training and education for them to give them the skills to be able to do that. And we also had to really make sure that we infused into the system a way to really audit and check to make sure the decisions that managers were making were the right ones.
Are there any key learnings from your experience to share with others?
I think the biggest is to obviously communicate and prepare the organization. So we took a long time to ramp up to this. We're on our second year, but we really started 3 years ago and took the entire year to really socialize the change, understand what the needs were, what the concerns were, and build in sort of the right support system and training to be able to address that. And I think the other is to don't sell managers short. I think we certainly understood that there was a capability gap, but felt strongly that it could be overcome with the right support system. Managers want to do the right things. Obviously, you've got to trust how you've hired and the talent you have in the organization. So it really is just providing them the tools to be able to be successful.
And finally, Keith, your predictions for the future. How do you see these shifts in performance management taking hold in the next 5 to 10 years?
You know, it's interesting how fast times have changed. I think Dalana just mentioned around, the digital and how things are really changing. And I think what you're starting to see is a lot more technology and systems and processes that are going to be applied to this. I think data is the first place where now you can measure things. And, talking about employee engagement, which is kind of a soft feeling kind of thing, but you have organizations that are trying to measure and have analytics to kind of measure engagement. And then the next step is obviously how do you then implement performance management systems? How do you communicate them effectively? And these are all areas I think you can really start to use systems and technologies to complement. But the key thing is complement. Again, we've talked a lot about managers, and you have to trust your managers. They're the ones who are going to be really kind of core to that. But I think you can build a good support system around that to help evolve performance management to that ongoing conversation so that it's an ongoing development as opposed to kind of a one-time feedback mechanism.
Thank you both. For World at Work TV, I'm Allison Avalos.